It had been a long day, and all I wanted was some peace and quiet. My stepbrother, Alex, was supposed to be out for the weekend visiting his friends, leaving me home alone. I'd been counting on the time to relax, unwind, and get away from all the chaos that had been my life recently. Life hadn't been easy. My parents' recent divorce had thrown everything into a whirlwind. But tonight, I could finally breathe. The house was quiet when I arrived home. My mom had gone out with her new boyfriend for a dinner date, and I was left in my own little world. I threw my keys on the kitchen counter, kicked off my shoes, and went upstairs to my room. The weight of the day's stress melted away as I sank into my bed. I pulled the blanket up around me, planning to just scroll through my phone for a while. But then, to my surprise, I heard the sound of footsteps. Someone was in the house. Confused, I stood up and looked out my bedroom door, trying to listen more carefully. The floorboards creaked slightly as someone walked through the hall. I assumed it must have been Alex, back earlier than I had expected. I hesitated for a second before I heard a familiar voice from the hallway. "Hey," Alex called out. I opened the door to see him standing there, a small bag slung over his shoulder. His messy brown hair fell just above his eyes, and there was something about his expression that seemed a bit off. "I thought you were visiting your friends," I said, still surprised. He gave a short laugh. "Yeah, I was, but something came up. They're busy, so I came back early." He paused, looking around. "Mind if I hang out here for a bit?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Sure." I wasn't planning on doing anything anyway. Alex walked into my room, his gaze lingering on the bed for a moment. I quickly moved over to the corner to make space for him. The awkwardness of the moment was subtle but palpable. Ever since our parents got married, Alex and I had become closer, but there had always been a level of distance between us. We had our own worlds, and that had been fine. But something had changed in the past few months, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Alex sat down on the edge of my bed, taking off his shoes and setting them neatly beside him. I sat at my desk, pretending to focus on my phone, while I tried to ignore the growing discomfort in the air. He was closer than usual, and his presence felt different somehow. "So, what's new?" he asked, trying to break the silence. I shrugged again, still not fully making eye contact. "Not much. You know, the usual stuff." There was a brief silence as we both seemed to search for something to say. But nothing came. I could feel him watching me, his gaze a little too intense for comfort. The space between us felt smaller with every passing second. "Can I ask you something?" he said, breaking the silence with a question I wasn't expecting. "Sure," I said, though a slight unease crept into my voice. "Do you ever think about how things changed when our parents got together?" he asked, his voice softer now. I blinked, surprised by the question. It wasn't like Alex to get so deep about stuff like this. I guess. I mean, it's hard not to notice how everything shifted. Our families, our routines, even the way we interact. It's weird sometimes." He nodded, his eyes not leaving mine. I could tell he was trying to gauge my reaction. "Yeah, me too. I've been thinking about it a lot lately." The way he said it made me feel uneasy. The tension between us wasn't something I had been imagining. It was real, and it was making my heart race a little faster than usual. Alex stood up suddenly, his posture rigid. "I think I should get going, actually. Maybe I'll just crash in the living room or something." He paused, glancing toward the door. I didn't want him to leave. The house felt emptier when he wasn't around, and despite the awkwardness, his presence was something I wasn't ready to lose just yet. "You don't have to leave," I said quickly. "We can hang out. Just relax." "I don't mind." He hesitated again, his gaze flickering to the bed before meeting mine. "Okay. I guess if you're sure." He sat back down beside me on the bed, a little closer than before, and this time the space between us felt even smaller. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the warmth of his arm brushing against mine. It was a simple contact, but it made my pulse race, my breath catch. I shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to do with the sudden change in energy. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Alex didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. There was something there, something unspoken that I couldn't quite figure out. I don't know, he murmured. I guess I just like being with you. It feels different, you know. The words sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't talking about the usual sibling bond we had. This was something new, something more intimate. I forced myself to look away, trying to hide the blush that crept up my neck. Yeah, I guess things are different, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt heavier, charged with an electricity I hadn't expected. The soft hum of the night seemed to amplify the silence around us, making every little sound stand out. Then, without thinking, I reached up and brushed a strand of hair out of Alex's face. The gesture was simple, but it felt intimate. As my hand lingered near his cheek, I felt an undeniable connection, a bond that was more than just family. Alex's eyes flickered toward my hand before meeting my gaze again. His lips parted as if he was about to say something, but then the words never came. The air was thick with tension, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Was this really happening? Was I really sitting here, so close to my stepbrother, feeling something I shouldn't? Alex, I breathed, my voice faltering. What is happening right now? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned in just slightly, his breath warm against my skin. My heart raced, and everything inside me screamed to pull away. But for some reason, I couldn't move. For a moment, the world stood still, the only sound the quickening of our breaths. And then, without warning, Alex closed the gap between us, his lips brushing against mine. I don't know how long we sat there, the quiet of the room wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. His kiss was soft, tentative, and full of unspoken emotions. I should have pulled away, should have stopped it, but something about it felt right, despite the overwhelming sense of wrongness that clawed at the back of my mind. Alex pulled back slowly, his forehead resting against mine, our breaths shallow and erratic. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. My heart was pounding, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind that I couldn't control. Was this a mistake? Did he feel the same way? What had just changed? Are you okay? Alex whispered, his voice hushed, almost afraid. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze for the first time since it happened. His eyes were wide, filled with vulnerability and something else, something deeper. He seemed as lost as I felt. I don't know, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. This feels wrong. Alex nodded, a sad expression crossing his face. Yeah, I know. But it doesn't feel wrong in the way I thought it would. It just feels complicated. I pulled my hand back, suddenly aware of the distance that still lay between us, the emotional distance that had always kept us apart, but now felt like an insurmountable chasm. Why did we do that? I asked, my voice trembling. I couldn't understand why this had happened. Why, in the heat of the moment, we had let everything slip. He sighed deeply, sitting back slightly, running his hand through his hair. I don't know. I've been feeling this way for a while, and I thought maybe it was just me. But when we were close tonight, when we talked, it felt like maybe you felt it too. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. I looked down, unable to meet his eyes. The guilt, the confusion, it all hit me in a tidal wave. This wasn't just some fleeting moment. This was something that had crossed a line, something irreversible. We crossed a line, I murmured, my chest tightening with the weight of the realization. We can't undo this, Alex. Alex stood up, pacing for a moment. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I never wanted to do anything that would mess everything up between us. I don't know. There's something between us, and it's been there for so long. I looked up at him, feeling the emotions well up in my chest. But we can't just ignore it, can we? We can't pretend this didn't happen. It's too complicated, too wrong. He paused, turning back toward me, his expression serious. What if it doesn't have to be wrong? What if we just let this be what it is? No pressure, no labels, just us. I don't know how to explain it, but I've never felt more alive than when I'm around you. I shook my head, the weight of his words hitting me in ways I couldn't describe. But we're family, Alex. This isn't just something we can figure out. There's too much at stake. Our parents, Everything we know, it could all fall apart. He looked at me, his expression softening. I know. I don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't want to ruin what we have. But I don't want to ignore this either. It's been too long, and I can't keep pretending. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, a mix of frustration and sadness, of guilt and longing. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want to ruin everything either. Alex crossed the room and sat back down next to me, this time giving me space, but not pulling away completely. He put his arm around me, and I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. We didn't say anything for a while. The silence felt comforting, like a brief respite before everything came crashing down. Maybe we need some time, he finally said, his voice calm. Maybe we need to think about what this means and what we want. But I don't want to lose you, no matter what happens. I nodded, wiping my tears. I don't want to lose you either, Alex. The room felt still, the weight of the moment settling in. I didn't know what the future held, and I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. But for now, we were here, together in this space, trying to make sense of something neither of us fully understood. We didn't talk much after that. Alex stayed for a while longer, but we both knew that the dynamic between us had changed. There was no going back. There were no clear answers, no easy way forward. But we had taken the first step, and now we would have to figure out where that step would lead. Eventually, the night ended. Alex said he was going to sleep in his room. Neither of us made any mention of what had happened. We didn't need to. We both knew that things would never be the same again. The next few days passed in a blur. The silence between Alex and I was deafening, and every time we crossed paths, there was that unspoken tension. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was nothing more than casual conversation. But the weight of our shared moment hung between us like a dark cloud. I couldn't forget what had happened. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the part of me that felt like things had shifted in a way I couldn't explain. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that our relationship would never be the same again, no matter how hard we tried to pretend otherwise. Alex and I never spoke of that night again. We didn't need to. The truth was clear. Everything had changed, and we were both left to figure out what that meant. For better or for worse, that night would stay with us forever, a turning point in our lives we could never forget.